Krásné odpoledne.
Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you can hear me well. So let me welcome you to the Chamber of Commerce of the Czech Republic. This is a pre-election debate with candidate MEPs organized by the Association of Innovative Pharmaceutical Industry together with the Chamber of Commerce of the Czech Republic. What is ahead of us are 2 hours dedicated to the future of healthcare and innovative treatments in Europe. The EU puts great effort in new pharmaceutical legislation that aims at equitable and as fast as possible approach of EU citizens to innovative treatments and medicines. The EC has already provided its proposal. The European Parliament has responded. However, the Parliament won't be able to negotiate its package before the elections, so it will be up to the Council and the new Parliament to finalize all those efforts. But we have candidates here for MEPs. But before I hand over to them to comment, let me pass the floor to Tomáš, Prouza, Vice President of the Chamber of Commerce, who will open this event officially. Misha said at the outset that I should mind the step and not fall down, so I have done my best not to do that. Thank you very much for coming. There is indeed great interest shown in the topic of healthcare because what Misha has touched upon is only a part of the agenda that's ahead of the new European Parliament. So during COVID, indeed, we could see that it's worth a while to agree on a joint approach, etc. So in the new mandate, many topics will be very relevant when it comes to healthcare and actually, this debate is being streamed, and let me say that for the members of the Chamber of Commerce, it is indeed very important what these topics will be. So we look forward to the debate. This debate is certainly not going to take place only once every 5 years. So after the elections, when the working agenda of the Commission will be defined, we'll be going back to the topics. And allow me to thank the Association of Innovative Pharmaceutical Industry that it's pushing the Chamber somewhat to holding such debates. So we're dedicating indeed more and more attention, more intense attention to topics like today's, because we indeed see great importance in it. And what is debated today will indeed be reflected in the work that is done in the years to come. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tomáš Prouza. So that was the Vice President of the Chamber of Commerce. And you indeed have managed also to mind the step and not to fall down. However, but now let's dive right in the topics ahead of us. So we'll be speaking about the general pharmaceutical legislation, the strategy of Europe, that is the strategic autonomy of Europe, to what extent Europe will be dependent on medicines supplies from abroad, and then the single European health data space. So that's the topics that we'll cover. And the association and the Chamber have already held a business breakfast dedicated to debates with the respective candidate MEPs. And you may already be familiar with them all, or at least some of them. So allow me to extend my welcome to Ondřej Knotek, who is already an MEP and candidate for the ANO movement. I'd like to welcome Ondřej Krutílek here, who is candidate of the SPOLU coalition. Good afternoon. And last but not least, we have Štěrba, neurosurgeon and candidate for the Pirate Party. Good afternoon. And you'll have a chance to ask them questions either directly here in this room or through Slido. And Slido actually interconnects us. Also, if you're watching the AFP YouTube channel, you can either use the QR code or do the hashtag. It's Debata.eu. That's the hashtag. And if you don't want to use the QR code, we'll have the last 30 minutes of our agenda dedicated to Q&A. However, without any further ado, I'd like to hand over to David Kolář, Executive Director of the Association of Innovative Pharmaceutical Industry, AFP. He will outline the topics. Thank you very much for the floor. Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a true pleasure for me that I won't have to host this debate. You have a professional host. And I would like to thank the gentlemen that they already took part in our business breakfast and that they are now taking part in this joint discussion, and thanks to the Chamber of Commerce for co-organizing this event. It's a great pledge that we've heard from the Chamber that they would like to continue in this series of debates. So I've got some 5 minutes for my intro presentation. I won't really speak for long, so focusing on the innovation side of it, because we already in the business breakfast heard a lot. And let's indeed discuss those issues from your mutual perspectives. But let's indeed go back in history, and during COVID, it became apparent that healthcare systems in Europe and Europe itself is not as strong as we may have thought, and that's why it was a great step that pharmaceutical strategy for Europe in 2020 was outlined, and we all here agree with these four goals, because that really was a great outline for the journey. And then following up on that pharmaceutical strategy for Europe, was the reform of EU's pharma legislation. So here, equitable access to safe and effective medicines, security of supply, then attractiveness of European innovations and competitiveness, R&D and medicines production, environmental sustainability, and addressing antimicrobial resistance. We often address the topics from the healthcare point of view, but when you look at the topics, many of those themes are not healthcare related, but rather industry related. So it's a shame that we do not have a comprehensive approach to all these major areas. And with the help of the Chamber of Commerce, we indeed strive to get colleagues from the Ministry of Industry and Trade on board. They actually feel that this is more the healthcare agenda, but it's not quite true. And when we look at these outlined areas, this is something where we'd like to contribute as part of the discussion. But when we actually looked at the text in detail, our optimism has vanished, because the EC decided to shorten the regulatory protection. It also mentions the unmet medical need, and then there is also interlinkage with environmental legislation. So as for this representing the sugar and stick, that it's more of a stick than sugar, what it contained. Actually, this proposed solution definitely won't lead to the desired target. We have for a long time been discussing different access to medicines, different availability in member states at a given point in time. So we naturally need to look at why this is happening and analyze it in more detail. So the EC believes that we, for that sake, need to address the IP rights, and it didn't look at other factors that may come in play. So it just disregarded the 27 different systems that are in place. So even though there is the MA, then there are those different systems. And that's just like one example out of many. And then from the perspective of the innovative pharma industry, if you change the rules or incentives for IP rights protection, how can that contribute to enhancing attractiveness of Europe? So naturally, if you're a pharma company that naturally needs to generate some profit, you need to have a predictable and transparent system. So if you do invest, you have to know under what terms there is the ROI. And this is something that also failed in the Commission's proposal. So a lot of unclarity there. And sometimes the companies can't really influence certain factors that are there. And all that will influence pharma companies' decisions whether they're willing to invest in Europe or not. The cycle of developing new innovative medicine takes 10 to 15 years and costs 1 to 2 billion euros. So naturally, I don't need to repeat all this because it's really familiar to you. Around 2010, Europe, in terms of the volume of innovations, was right after the US, but we see a widening gap here, and now we can't even compare to the US, and we need to also look what's behind us. And actually, well, this is a predictive model, but based on that model, it's clear that, for instance, China is catching up, and Europe needs to think through whether the steps that were presented in Commission's proposal, whether the gap is going to widen even more. It's definitely not going to ensure that we are closing the gap on the US. The position of the EP was already adopted, and this is far more consensual. So I believe that this is the first positive step to a more rational compromise, so the middle ground, so to speak. The EP actually listened to all the stakeholders, so not just the innovative pharma industry, but also colleagues from the generic industry, and they strive to find a path that should lead to achieving the outlined objectives. So we'll see what the negotiations at the Council are going to look like. Well, the Ministry is not really open to discussion, and a lot is going on behind closed doors, and discussions are not really ongoing, which is a shame, because if you're representing the country, you should ask all the key stakeholders, including the industry, and this is not happening. But what's crucial for today's debate is that this is still the first third, or perhaps we're like in halfway through, because perhaps during the Polish presidency in the first half of next year, they could be drawing close to an objective, and then the trilogue will start, so there'll be sufficient space to discuss those topics further. It's not just about the general pharma legislation, but we have also other topics to discuss today, the European Health Data Space Strategic Autonomy of Europe. But let me hand back to Misha, and I hope that you'll also get involved in the discussion and enjoy this debate this afternoon. So thank you very much. So that was the Executive Director of AIFB, David Kolář. So we know what the starting points are. But let's perhaps start with a more general question. So just that your opinions are clear to me. So let's start from the middle, from Ondřej Krutílek. Does Europe stand a chance that state-of-the-art innovative therapy is available in all EU 27 member states at the same time? What should we do for that sake? So we need to align what's going on in all the EU member states with EU at large. So actually we started on a general note, but let me start more broadly. I believe that one of the biggest values of the EU is the possibility to have a single market, a common market. And up until present day, how it has been is that we were a lot fragmented. And during COVID, that had its implications, whether it was, for instance, individualized purchases of the face masks, etc. And what has come out of the European Parliament as regards this pharma package is actually quite a good compromise, even though there are some details that I don't like. And what I mean is that if we have this 7.5 years protection, we're speaking on specific terms, and if then it's prolonged by either 6 months or 12 months, whether the producers actually then disseminate their medicines across EU27 under predictable conditions. This means that we're making use of what the business can do, but at the same time we're offering the results to a whole EU market. And naturally we can then discuss the details, what needs to be fine-tuned for it to work in practice. But this starting position is, and I don't really often say that because usually what's coming out of the European Parliament are things that are more problematic, to put it diplomatically. Oh, yes, yes, I understand. But I believe that we are on a good path in this case. Thank you very much. And now we have a medical doctor here, and I'd like to ask Albert Štěrba on his perspective on the access to state-of-the-art care and treatments across the whole EU. Can that be aligned? And aligned with what specifically? So at present, how it is that before an innovative medicine gets to the market, it differs. So in Germany, for instance, we're have really very fast availability, access to treatments, but in Romania it's much longer. Let's be optimistic, and indeed there is a chance, because if there was no chance to align all that, then it wouldn't be worth the while to even attempt at any legislation. But the bottleneck and this lack of efficiency means that there is often duplicity when, for instance, there is the approval process of medicines. And perhaps this, I'm speaking on behalf of the Pirate Party, that we believe data are key. So when we're speaking about availability, so the process is taking place in one country, the data should also be available in the other countries that decide whether to permit the medicine on their market, whether there is enough safety, etc., and then the reimbursement analysis and so on and so pricing and all that. And based on the data, they can draw conclusions for their respective markets. So they save energy, finance, and it speeds up the whole process to make sure that the time to market in the respective country is not as drastic as, for instance, the difference between Baltic countries, Romania and Germany, etc. Thank you very much. And Ondřej Knotek will be the last here. So he was there in the EP when it was adopting its position. So perhaps you can touch upon how the debates were done. So what was the biggest bottleneck? Where were the biggest differences in the EP? So in the EP, there are two debate levels. So one is the rapporteurs on behalf of the political factions, so there are detailed discussions going on in there, and then there would be the political aspects that come in place, so 100 or 200 MEPs discussing that, and then towards the end, almost everybody has their respective opinion about that. So when we are speaking about this pharma legislation, it has basically narrowed down to the patent protection period from 8 to 6. Then other opinion was that it should be 10, and there were like two opinion streams there. So we are narrowing down this vital legislation to that, and that's not good. So there were the key rapporteurs, then people from the committees, so the environment committees, food safety and public health, that dedicate their attention to it, so they have more detailed information at hand. And perhaps I could also answer one question. Yes, feel free to. Whether We are sort of moving to alignment. I thought that you would tell me how much the individual faction representatives quarrel. So perhaps not everybody understands it, and they've narrowed it down to this one thing. Yes, exactly. You've understood me correctly. But let me speak on behalf of those who know more about the details, the gist of it, so where it's all heading. So where it is heading is that availability will increase and differences are going to be reduced. I believe that over a short period of time, we can't have fully equitable access guaranteed. Mr. Kolář, in his opening remarks, has touched upon this topic. So it's naturally not just up to the pharma company, but it's also up to the member state. When, for instance, the MA is being done and all that. So there are many aspects that need to be dealt with, and it may be cross-border aspects, rare diseases, etc. And there are cases of, for instance, Czech children receiving treatment abroad, etc. So it perhaps can't be fully equitable, but we can go back in the right direction. Should the competence to set healthcare and pharma legislation at national level or EU level, I believe that it's going to be a shared competence, just like with structural funds. So governments, if they are to be responsible for people's health, the trend is that the citizen expects the government to take due care of that. On the other hand, there should be cooperation and certain processes at European level. So it's, I believe, in the next 10 to 15 years, a combination of shared competence.
Shared competencies. So what is your view? Where we'll start? Gentlemen, should it be more at the national or at European level? Well, I think the question whether more or less, it should be just right. And whatever could be resolved, whatever we have had in common at the European level, we should resolve commonly. And of course, where the healthcare systems are different, the individual features should be resolved at a national level. And definitely, while talking about product development or about rules for central approval and so on, it should be done at the European level. It makes sense. Nevertheless, speaking about domestic level, speaking about reimbursement schemes and so on, it should be up to the national level because the purchase power and individual situation of inhabitants, prescriptions, rules and so on is different. Then it is strange if the European legislation is built on it, setting the conditions for patent productions, setting how it is going to be ruled in all 27 member states. Well, we have to distinguish two things. First of all, what we would like to achieve, and second, what is achievable in practice. During the COVID pandemic, we were talking about European Union not having sufficient competencies in the healthcare, in the contracts and so on, and everything should have been amended towards the central management. European Union has sufficient competencies to fulfill own goals, and the goals are in fact set in such a general mode that everything can be hidden under it, which means that the European Union, speaking about business and setting rules for business, it could be done. Nevertheless, if we wish to have at the European level, under the European level managed also the healthcare systems, then it should be under the competencies of individual member states, and we should need to find balance. And whatever legislation is going to be written, no legislation will resolve it. So let's think about reality and question about the true question. That's what has been discussed at the business breakfast. I would say the incentives for the pharma industry to enjoy longer protections are right from the principle. Nevertheless, speaking about the nature of the protection, is it functioning in practice, or in contrary, 7.5 years plus 1 year, doesn't it create deeper legal insecurity compared to what we want to achieve? Of course, I'm not talking on behalf of the business, but unless the business works according to predictable rules, then the accessibility of medicine will deteriorate. In my view, the optimal solution would be if the onset of the process at the level of individual member states, that means registration, so would also be associated with longer protection period. And then, of course, we can talk about the individual period. And I would say we should be flexible in the detail deadlines. Well, talking about the years of patent protection, we should not have the condition when the individual medicine will be launched on the market, but when it's going to be required to be registered. Yeah, exactly, because we have to tune the legislation according to abilities of individual member states. And unless we do it, then the results will be reflected in practice, shown in shortages of the medicines, maybe not in absolute manner, but time to time. Ondřej Knotek, the discussion covered three worlds, three areas, of course. It would depend on the level of the innovative industry coverage or generics coverage, or whether you are a country where you enjoy both innovative medicines and generics. Rare forms, in fact. In fact, the idea the Green Party is 3 to 4 years maximum, and then one Nordic nation, the individuals just suggested a longer period than 10 years. And what had happened? I think that the result is that substantially it is not shortening the protection. So 7.5 years of protection, it is okay. It's by 6 months shorter. Nevertheless, the additional conditions where you can enjoy the additional elements of protection maximally plus 1 year, that means 8.5 years in total, plus 2.5 years of market protection, that means 8.5 plus 2 years. And in fact, at the beginning, the Parliament is suggesting all possible scenarios. It's nice to have feature, but not realistic. But then we have ended up reduced it to 3 to 4 conditions. I think you know it all. Nevertheless, generally speaking, if a national institution contributed to development, or a university, or a national scientific institution, then you enjoy the protection. And of course, while resolving the unmet medical needs, something that has not been resolved and delivered before. And if you invent a new molecule, which is, however, better than the existing one, those are the features that tells us, let's produce it here. If you produce it in Europe, it's a response to what Mr. Kolář had suggested at the beginning. The figures are clear. The trend is clear. Competitiveness, attract investment in Europe is at very low level in Europe, in the US, China, or in Israel. Until recently, it was different. We got 7.5 years. We no longer have the duty of 27 MAs. Nevertheless, it is not maybe the easiest one, what our colleague had suggested. to simplify that. If you just forward an email to Ministry of Health or FDA, so then it's probably not something that might be approved in the Parliament. So we have done it from the other ways, from the European Parliament level. It's about the fact if the states wanted to achieve it, then would require the pharma company, and then they are obliged to do the MA. And of course, it is split to the size according to sizes of the companies. The larger corporations, of course, employ regulatory experts, departments, and so on. Well, I used to work for one big pharma industrial, and I know how it works. So I think this approach is quite good. In the last 4 years in the European Parliament, in fact, the ambitions are very high. Nevertheless, it was not built on real basis, and I think the result was not that bad. The question is, what is going to happen with that in the next round of procedures? Albert Štěrba, would you like to add on it? So what to do about the protection in order to boost the innovative industry, also the generics industry? Well, I would like to, I don't have such an insider view as my colleague Mr. Knotek from the European Parliament. Nevertheless, the political discussion that was suggested showed that even the MEP are not clear. Somebody suggested 4 years, somebody 11. So how did they build it? Is it based on ideology or is it data-based? Even though I do not know about the data analysis right now, I hope that smart expert had suggested it, and hopefully they will agree on 7.5 years. And hopefully it makes economic sense. Maybe they said 8 years is too much, 7 is too short, so 7.5. Well, I hope it is not just only a calculation and average number. So let's hope that everybody would benefit, both patients and the healthcare systems and pharma industry will be able, with respect to initial investment, to pay it back and invest into new medicine again. I hope that this figure is based on real data, and pharma industry will be able to fund its development, but at the same way, it will not deteriorate the position of patients. What I mean, the medicine would be that expensive that it will not be able to pay it. So, Ondřej Krutílek, is it based on true data? Do you want to get true, honest answer, or, well, I will disclose freely that I have problems with impact studies of EU long term, because the impact studies are made to order to show positive results for the entire EU. So, in fact, they do not reflect situations in individual member states, which is not the correct approach in my view. For instance, the Climatic Act, the basis of Green Deal was not based on any impact study. I know it is not within our focus, but that's how it works in comparison with practice, in my view. Whatever is generated in European Parliament, I think it is politically motivated number, but of course it's logical. European Commission forwards it, and politicians make a decision. And I think the result is relatively good. And I would say more than 500 of 700 MEPs have voted for it. They supported it, which is quite good results in my view. So speaking about Green Deal, issues, the results of voting were narrower, much narrower, and I think that this is a quite solid basis for the position of European Parliament to justify the next discussions with member states. Ondřej Knotek. So my colleague had explained it really well, and it is not only about European Parliament, because the dialogue, the discussion between the European Parliament, of course, is well settled. Of course, member states have their own positions, and in between there is European Commission. So speaking on the general level in Brussels, what they do, well, I do not refer to data. Let's say the European Commission would suggest 5, European Parliament would propose 6, no matter how much it costs and whether it's feasible. But unfortunately, even the suggested 5, it is not based on data. And then member states would say, well, we would have to implement it and we want to have 4. So one suggests 4, the other one 5, and the other 6. And after 6 months of negotiation, they agree on 5.1. And it is in a really fast pace. I don't have a chance to benchmark it with other mandates. What my more experienced colleagues say, who work 15 to 20 years in the European Parliament, I think they deserve Nobel Prize. So, in fact, the European Parliament also generates a resolution, political ones that have no practical impact. So the quality of work is low. Nevertheless, if I may briefly speaking, well, you just led me to the next question, since Ondřej Krutílek also wanted to answer. Well, I would be interested to know, you all have mentioned, tackled upon the funding. Of course, the access to state-of-the-art treatment also means more money. Now, can Europe afford it? Can individual states afford it? Before I give you my answer, just general comment. How the European Union is preparing legislation based on data and everything must be punctual. It is not true. European Commission, the current one, is one of the most political European Commission I remember ever. So it's politics, only one level up. And that's about termination of our discussion, to what extent they work with data and what EU actually does. Well, what was your question? Well, of course, European Union cannot afford it. They don't have enough money. So that's why I talked about harmonizing both worlds. We can regulate something, we can just put something on paper. Nevertheless, at the same time, we need to keep in mind that finally, ultimately, at the end of the chain, you got 27 different reimbursement systems. And you simply cannot prepare the legislation in a vacuum, just creating wonderful piece of paper that will be then, if not rejected by member states, then it won't be able to implement it by member states. So it was my answer.
Thank you very much. And Albert Štěrba? Well, treatment then is paid by the healthcare companies in the respective member states. So I do hope that they'll do some analysis what the treatment costs are with that new medicine, without, and then it is important to have treatment reasonably priced. So probably a compromise will always need to be reached. And if we speak about compromise, well, nobody will be 100% satisfied. So developers, manufacturers won't be perhaps 100% satisfied, not even the member states, but it must be for the general good. Well, it's perhaps good if people are least dissatisfied. That's my belief. Thank you. As for the financial sustainability of healthcare systems, major debates are dedicated to that topic, and unless a major change of approach takes place, the development is not good. So the first thing is, can we spend more on healthcare? So through member states on the domestic ground, promote R&D at EU level? Well, yes, we can do, but it's about priorities. So, for instance, in the healthcare subcommittee, I said that more needs to be allocated to the development of innovative medicines in Europe rather than to the construction of huge solar parks that, the solar panels are then manufactured in China. And, then one French MEP actually responded to me, but luckily I didn't understand that. But let's really work with the budget that we have. So there is a healthcare budget, and that's where the opportunity lies. And perhaps there was a minor misunderstanding between me and Mr. Krutílek. So on behalf of the Ano movement, I do not want to be shifting responsibilities to Brussels, certainly not. But there are certain European processes out there that are possible and that are meaningful, and that is, for instance, the strategies. So, for instance, the Beating Cancer Plan at EU level, we also have similar strategies for cardiovascular diseases, etc. And the general pharma legislation being narrowed down to whether it's 8.5, 7.5 or whatever that is. But it's not just that, and there also has to be the framework for rare diseases, etc. So really highlighting prevention and early identification and treatment, which helps to reduce cost because of failed prevention and lack of early intervention. The costs are soaring high. Then we have, for instance, transformational gene therapies. Then we also have, for instance, huge spending on dialysis. But for instance, if an artificial kidney was invented, then huge costs could be saved, etc. But really, we should shift the funding to promoting prevention and early intervention because that will help us not to go bankrupt. Thank you very much. Albert Štěrba wanted to respond. Yes. I did, but it has already been mentioned. But let me just highlight that we should indeed have a strategic and a very broad perspective on healthcare. And the money we save should be spent on primary and secondary prevention. And then what's saved there could then be used in other domains of healthcare. So, for instance, gene therapies, more expensive medicines, use of modern technologies in healthcare. We can't address these topics in isolation. So you can't address A without having the B as well. And let me highlight that the biggest potential really does lie in prevention. Population is aging quite dramatically. And unless something happens that, for instance, every woman would start having 8 kids or so, then the aging population will indeed have its needs. And then we use healthcare mainly when we're getting older to enjoy life when our health is already quite poor. But we should have more of the quality of life years spent healthy, not the disease years. Okay, yes, I agree. But Mr. Krutílek wanted to comment. I just wanted to say that while speaking about this topic, we are all united, so it's probably hard for you to select your favorite candidate MEP because we all are consensual on that. But as regards this debate about the GPL, narrowed down to this regulatory data protection, let me mention one more thing here. Well, one positive aspect and two negative aspects. So the positive aspect is that what is also being addressed is antimicrobial resistance. So this is something that was talked about for years, but nothing was done about it. And now, at last, it is getting tangible. I regard this as very important. And the two negatives that I need to mention that need to be addressed, and I really don't know how, but let's take a look at them. That's the delegated acts. So there has to be at least elementary legal certainty for the business that's involved. And the amount of delegated acts is huge. And I don't know if you find this reassuring or not, but you're not alone. Any other business over the past 5 years has suffered from this extension of delegated acts that goes beyond what used to be common in the past and what's necessary. The reason being is that the Commission indeed does more than what it can handle. Then it produces legislation that's defected, and the delegated acts, that's the result of that. So that's one point. And as for the environmental aspects, so for instance, there's extended liability of producers, etc. So this is something with which I don't really have a problem, but as it's defined in the directive and in the regulation, in my view, it is again too much to bring the required added value. So those were the topics that I wanted to touch upon. Thank you very much. Well, I indeed wanted the debate not to be just about patent protection, but we've always strayed away to it. Another major topic over the past year or two is access to medicines, availability of medicines. Is the voluntary solidarity mechanism enough from October last year, and the list of critical medicines, and then the procurement guidelines and all that. So is that enough, or what has to be done to ensure access to medicines? Let me take this question. There are several levels there, so something has already taken place at European level. Other things are in the hands of member states. And let me say that the supplies in the past were very much influenced by COVID. So back then, many manufacturing capacities didn't manufacture, and then the energy crisis came, geopolitical crisis. So we have Iran, Russia, and China, as opposed to the Euro-Atlantic world, to put it simply, and the world that had existed prior to 2019. So I ordered today, and it arrives in less than a week from China. It no longer exists. So as for the unavailability, the shortages, so this is something that we experienced. The EU responded in a certain manner. I wouldn't say it was an optimal manner, but it was quite good. It strengthened the role of the EMA as regards monitoring, and also certain powers. Really identifying the critical medicines. Then providing certain guidance to member states, etc. So that has been done, several regulations in that respect. And at the same time, member states have been enabled to, the ministries and the State Institute for Drug Control can actually prolong the shelf life. So it's a national decision. It's always going to be a national decision. But the EU has actually enabled that to happen if need be. And at the same time, it's also possible to allow a medicine with similar properties to enter the market. So there is at least some framework, albeit not so strong, plus the stronger position of the EMA during joint purchasing, procurement rather, and if for instance, a group of volunteers decide to go into these joint procurements, the EMA provides its support in this respect. And then I don't want to reopen the topic, but it's part of this package, and EU for Health and together with Horizon for Europe, money can be allocated to innovative antibiotics producers for achieving certain milestones in development. So EU funds are out there, but naturally it's predominantly the national budget, but even EU money is available for enhancing availability. Thank you very much. And Ondřej Krutílek would like to comment. I do agree with the analysis as outlined by Ondřej here, but let's be open and frank. If we look at what the pharma package proposal looks like and what what measures have been made there to prevent unavailability, shortages, out-of-stock situations. So it's again paper and just paper, nothing else. And really that won't solve the problem. If we want to have at least some elementary strategic autonomy, if we don't want to be dependent on suppliers and regimes with which we have a problem, we should be able to produce at least part of what we need here in Europe. And the question then arises, are we able to build a production plant in Europe, manufacturing plant in Europe? Well, I'm not convinced about that. So perhaps let me turn the question around and ask you and Mr. Štěrba. Will manufacturers want to build a plant in Europe? And they already shifted production somewhere because it wasn't advantageous for them in terms of regulation. So what would we need to do so that they would want to build it here in Europe? I think you've already answered the question. The regulation that enables you to build anything, and it's not just that, but in a few years' time, it will be a big problem to build a family house. It's already a problem. Well, in all EU member states, because of EU legislation, it's going to be an ever greater problem here as well. But I don't want to stray away from your question. So we really need to somehow get through and somehow reduce this regulatory burden. Ursula von der Leyen had her speech, and she was coming with various ESG legislation, and then she said that it would be good to reduce the reporting burden on business by 25%, that is, businesses operating in Europe. Well, we may think whatever we wish about that. I believe that she is paving the way for her next 5-year term of office. So she probably understood that her commission actually overdid things in the past. But that's actually correct what she said in her speech. We need to set rules where indeed there will be some leeway because currently there is no leeway. So that's my answer to your question. So the business would want to build plants in Europe if rules are predictable and not going against each other. Albert Štěrba, I believe that here it's worth the while to proceed just like in other industries. And, if, for instance, we would speak about the Green Deal or other aspects, what we should strive to is to, for instance, have some incentives there, whether it's, for instance, tax reductions or subsidies, etc. So we should what we can to produce, to motivate, to promote the producers, the manufacturers to do that. The market then decides that it doesn't pay, for instance, to build a plant here and they should go to India or China. But then there is this security aspect. It's not good to have everything in India or China, at least a certain percentage, whether it's 20%, 40%. It doesn't need to be a majority of medicines produced in Europe, but a certain part actually needs to be produced in Europe because we already see what's going on around the world and more things may even happen. environment. So it's political decision. It may not make economic sense, but political decision should be made that certain plants should be built here, because we mustn't rely just on supplies from abroad. So yes, it will be an initial investment, and there may be some resistance against it, but in effect, I believe it's going to be profitable for us, because if we again are the innovators, if we again produce things with added value, there is this snowball effect of other related industries, etc. And it's not that we in Europe only buy from abroad, but we also add value and manufacture here. So the next Parliament and Commission will probably need to take a decision that, for instance, the security situation demands that a part of medicines is to be manufactured in Europe. And if you agree on that one, then the question is, how should that be achieved? So through incentives or somehow reducing regulations? We've already touched upon the strategic autonomy of Europe that has been set out but not achieved as yet. Ondřej Knotek has not really spoken about that, but in your pre-election campaign you spoke about the initiative for development and manufacturing of medicines in the territory of the EU. So what's the path here of achieving at least certain autonomy?
Yeah, I will just refer to my colleague Mr. Štěrba. There are two ways. The French way, nevertheless, I would say it is far away, which means to build European pharma Airbus, ideally 27 production plants plus research institutions, and be funded from EU, and then it will be able to compete with corporate companies. But I think this would be only an emergency solution, and hopefully it will not happen. Then it's about the environment, and we have spent a lot of time discussing about pharma legislation, which is the specific tool which may be in fact impactful to boost investment within in Europe. Nevertheless, as it was already explained, over-regulation is one element which is related to legal insecurity, plus energy prices. Of course, every production plant consumes kilometers of pipelines of steam, plus agitation, energy demanding processes, and so on, which is quite complex. I'm rather a business person in my heart. In the US, the energy is cheaper. During the COVID, the employment rate steeply reduced, but once the economy was boosted again, then the employment rate was increased steeply again. And I have to say that US and East Asia and China are far away. And speaking about a molecule, then once we create a new molecule, then it's sold to the US and it's implemented over there. So we have to find an environment why companies would like to invest in Europe, and it is impossible to achieve it without the motivation, incentives. I don't know whether it will make sense to create a semi-private, semi-state company, something like the energy company CEZ. But definitely we have to discuss with the industries, and we have to ask, what is your motivation? Why are you here? Because, of course, the board of the multinational company does not make decisions by heart. They have to decide based on data. Well, I would expect that you would suggest profit. What is your profit? Return of investment, yes, and ROI plus profit. Yeah, that's my motivation. Yes, thank you very much for shortening my speech. That's probably what I wanted to suggest. And maybe one thing, something that would just reduce the price level, maybe even everybody who is sitting here, even though it is organized by the innovative industry, we should find a place for generics because ultimately they just decrease the price level of the market. So it was achieved from the parliament in the pharmaceutical legislation. Once we achieve the ROI, then the generics should be able to enter the market as cheaper product, and the entire industry will be boosted. Gentleman who would like to respond now? While thinking about the situation of Europe, and David Kolář had already explained that most of the innovative pharma company came from Europe originally. So maybe a little bit of heart aspect or sentiment may play a role, but of course it is not sufficient. So what is the suggested route? So maybe I will just talk a little bit outside of our focus, but then I'll get back to it. I would like to talk about the Green Deal again. So the Inflation Reduction Act, a big legislation in the US. It is such an important piece of legislation. Probably somebody of us still do not understand how important it is. But the threat is that a lot of innovative companies, batteries, e-vehicles, and other companies, industries with added values will move over to the US because they have better conditions over there to further develop, especially tax conditions. So tax reliefs is maybe less demanding ways how to boost the industry, subsidize it. Maybe that's the way. Maybe I would like to open a brainstorming session now. Isn't that the way? Let's say if you, from the position of European politics, you as the pharma industry would build a plant in Spain, Italy, or elsewhere in Europe producing medicines, and this will create 20% of your total production. It will be based here in Europe, 80% will be based elsewhere, and then you will be granted such tax relief that it will pay off. And I think it seems to be the right way, because that's the way what US is promoting. So maybe pharma industry in the Czech Republic should copy and paste it. Ondřej Krutílek, thank you very much. Well, I think we simply have to play with the facts that are available. We simply have to play according to the current situations, to facts we have available. So your party had voted for all green legislation, and now you promote the US way. Well, sorry, I could not stop thinking about it. And the second thing is that we don't have unified tax policy in Europe. So the only tool is that we are going to reduce the barriers among European states, but at the same time we will push away the European companies. We don't have any other options. So if we want to boost the European industries, because of course after these decisions, then it will be too far away from the population. I think it is already far away from the population now. So in my previous answer, I already explained deregulation, not in the way as it was done in 1990s. Let's deregulate everything, not like that. But in fact, I mean that rules should be more transparent, to be functional, not to change it constantly and so on. So whatever was explained about the labor market, of course, it's up to individual member states. Every member state have to set rules. And I'm glad that the labor market are not regulated centrally by EU, because potential competitiveness among EU member states' labor market in fact boost the competitiveness and development? Well, I would respond to Mr. Štěrba. Well, the Inflation Reduction Act was rightfully proposed, and you tried to respond to this U.S. legislation. And in fact, that's exactly how and why we have set the platform for strategic investment in Europe. And it comprises a lot of climate technologies also, and also pharma and medical aspects. And I don't remember it exactly. I don't know, maybe my colleague would remember it. I don't know, 140, 170 billion euros. And I don't know whether it's like in the cohesion funds, but in fact, Europe had started something in this aspect. We will see whether it will be sufficiently adequate. I dare to say it is not sufficiently ambitious because, in fact, we tend to follow the results decided in Brussels. So that's what we have decided. Yes, the medical products and pharma industry is included, but you have to decide whether it's sufficient or not. Well, it's probably not sufficient, but in order to complete this part of our discussion, I understood that Europe probably cannot be fully sufficient. Well, it should be sufficient in certain aspects, especially in innovative treatment, but I would like to know your view about generics, because, of course, talking about innovative medicine, they are produced in Europe, 70% of it. Nevertheless, generics are primarily produced outside of Europe. So how to increase accessibility, availability of generics, which are mainly produced by non-European countries after patent protection expires? Well, I would say that the partial answer is, again, from the strategic point of view, let's move part of the production to Europe. If there is a shortage of, let's say, 3 to 4 months, then we should, in fact, cover the shortage by European production before the ships will deliver it again over the ocean and so on. So we should have some emergency package to survive in autonomous or a semi-autonomous way independently. And the other thing about generics is, in addition to the production, it's probably good to think generally about generics. So we should purchase generics in a joint manner as Europe. So in the innovative medicine, every state individually maybe, but speaking about generics jointly. It's probably speaking about weapons for Ukraine. It was general procurement initiative, and I think we should use the strength, the power of the joint European market also for the better procurement position also in the pharmaceutical area. Thank you very much. To move certain capacity to Europe, well, I have to say, when I remember to the payments in the energy industries, companies, in order to allocate the capacity for us, meant that even though we don't consume it, we have to pay for it. So the question is how to set it in the healthcare. Ondřej Krutílek or Ondřej Knotek, who would like to answer? Well, it was, in fact, dealt with in the pharmaceutical legislation. Well, we have discussed it several times, and we just ended up in a compromise. Of course, there is something which is included in the pharmaceutical legislation, something that is important for pharma industry, and the thing is that so-called patent linkage is cancelled or reduced. And there is a section related to dollars. Well, I don't dare to elaborate on it because I really don't know it that much. But that's something what the European pharma industry wanted to achieve. So, well, it's in our interest to have innovative pharma industry here. Also, it's in the interest of generics because after a while we have nothing to control. to be in the position of control it. But the response was positive, so we don't know whether it was positive. So the question is, should we extend capacities? Well, I hope it is at least at the good way. So the current capacities of generics production in Europe are not going to be reduced. Well, we spoke about the regulatory chaos, and this is true for all medicine, especially for generics. I really think that Volar is the exception, and I would say that it is set quite well in the current legislation. And of course, if it is not mandatory, but it should be then up to individual member states to decide whether it is something they want to promote or not. So, yeah. Speaking about generics, for instance, to reduce cholesterol level, we got different Rosova, Atorva, like under statin generics. I think maybe it will be good to decide which of those generic products we should produce here. Then we would be able to satisfy the needs of patients by alternative generics. And then we won't have to maintain inefficient production facilities, pay for the energy bills and so on. It will not be 100%, but let's say it would cover 70%. What is most important to improve health care and accessibility? It is based on data. So Europe is trying to set better rules. And in fact, Europe had launched the system for primary and secondary use. Primary in the healthcare and the secondary maybe in the research industry and also in the state policies, healthcare policies. And as we already heard, the potential is reduced according to the draft proposal. So maybe I'll start with Albert Štěrba, that had not opened any of those sections yet. He, as a neurosurgeon, doesn't have this experience maybe. So maybe I'll start with my personal experience when serving in the outpatient. So 80% of my work is about copying, pasting, and data entry and so on. And only a small part is about true examination of patients. And when I admit a patient in the ward, then it is even worse ratio. So the GP's records are sometimes different from the internal medicine specialists and so on. And then I have to ask the patient to explain me about the way how he takes the prescribed medicine, about the adherence and so on. So that's about our effort to use the time of the healthcare professionals well, which is primarily about safe care for patients. And unfortunately, by never-ending typing again the same data, you generate potentially mistakes. And in the European space, the interoperability notion is the most important one. So we should create a structure of highways, railways for data across the entire Europe in order to be able to interchange it. So the way how it is going to be set in our hospital or in our region should be decided by individual member states. I think the best comparison would be what mobile operator. Somebody's got O2, somebody T-Mobile or Vodafone, and something like that. It is not achieved in the healthcare. If somebody is using SIS, somebody is using DIS system, then it is really not achieved. So speaking about e-prescriptions or tax, which is about exchanging healthcare imaging, then we are able to a certain extent to exchange the data. Nevertheless, it's an isolated system. Let's hope that it will be possible to exchange all other medical data. So data that we will have in structured machine-readable form would open great potential to develop medicine, do true science, and it will really open new door for the academics and industry also.
Well, that has even been calculated. 15% of hospital costs could be saved and 10% for sharing the results of imaging methods. So that could be the potential savings if that was achieved. Gentlemen, where do you see the potential for data sharing if you focus on the secondary use mainly? What access should medicine producers have to data? I believe, I still consider myself a member of the younger generation who loves to share things. So I believe that practically everything should be shared. If the data are anonymized, that helps to increase the efficiency of research, prevention and treatment itself. So I do not have an issue whatsoever with data sharing. And I would even dare say that the whole European health data space didn't need to be, or wouldn't have needed to be so complicated had we used GDPR and just would have updated that to take into account the specific nature of the healthcare sector. And that would have been a job done. But the Commission came with a more robust instrument. I can understand why, perhaps. But I believe that it could have been just, that the version of GDPR. And then, as we already touched upon, whether decisions are being made on basis of data or not, this is a huge opportunity to use data in the right manner for the benefit of healthcare systems in all member states. And as you have rightly pointed out, even save money while doing that. So as long as anonymity is ensured, I'm really in for it. Ondřej Knotek, please. Primary use has been really nicely described by Albert Štěrba. And the secondary use, this is something that we started hearing calls for that some 3 years ago. Then a group was formed in the parliament for the innovative gene and other therapies that are hugely costly but have the ability to actually cure the patient. So speaking about these innovative therapies for rare diseases, I know of 6,000 and new are cropping up. And actually rare diseases, it's not as rare because it's something concerning some 30 million patients in Europe. So it's 5 to 6% of the European population that has rare diseases. So then doing the regulation based on real-world data and real-world evidence. So their secondary data use is really crucial. One of the key policy recommendations that we submitted already at the beginning of 2021. And then actually there was this situation that it was narrowed down to basically two notions, opt-in and opt-out. Our Envy committee that addresses public health worked on it, and then LIBE, that is Human Rights Committee, naturally very important as well. So this is the committee that is also in charge of migration, among other things. So its perspective is that data would be at risk, even though it has been said that it should be anonymized. Yes, indeed, anonymized. And from risk management perspective, I don't see a risk there. The benefits are huge. And in the end, we achieved this agreement in the trialogue. So primary use of data as well as secondary use of data. In both cases, there is opt-out. It's actually even stronger in secondary use. So even though a patient doesn't want to, then it can be overridden by the government. So I believe that's very important because that's going to help develop rare disease medication. So I'm very happy that the outcome has been such. Okay, so in the trialogue, the outcome is that actually there is this possibility to opt out. So I don't want my anonymized data to be shared and included. But when we speak about data sharing, is it worth a while if the data are not going to be complete? May I just jump in? Well, the opt-out system is the following. So automatically you are in the system and then you must say a clear no that you're opting out. So it's not the opt-in. So at the beginning you have 100% of data users, and that may then be reduced to say 90% or 80%. So you have this basis. If it was the opposite, you would be starting from 0%, and then perhaps 10% would voluntarily give you the opt-in. So you wouldn't have enough data. But the opt-out system that has so far won. And at one point in time, it didn't look likely. So actually, we thought that we would use. So opt-in actually could have won. Yes, serious, really. And then there were the green MEPs and all that, and then those factions, anti-EU, they made the big headlines like Brussels wants to sell your data and stuff like that, which is indeed miles away from reality. But luckily, we managed. So I'm very happy that we have the opt-out system. So there is this mechanism that should be in place that should tell the patient, well, so you're at a crossroads here, so you can take your decision now. Okay, thank you very much. So let me perhaps rephrase my question. So as for secondary use, and I'd like Albert Štěrba to respond to that. So well, actually, the governments are reducing the possibility to obtain data that could be used in multiple arenas. Well, when there is this possibility, my understanding would be that, for instance, how the transplantation system works, it's an opt-out. If you don't opt out, it is automatically presumed that you would like to donate your organs for transplantations because you haven't clearly indicated that you don't want to do that. And it's indeed a minimal number of citizens, well, good news, who have opted out from the transplantation program as organ donors. I believe that unless a huge disinformation campaign takes place, I believe that the secondary use of data, this is for the good of everyone. It can't harm anyone. But anonymization is crucial in science and research. And we just need to strictly comply with GDPR, and that's already robust legislation. And if all that is complied with, nothing much changes. It's just going to be electronic data. Should access to data differ when it comes to the public and private sector? What do you mean, like secondary use of data? Yes, secondary use of data. I believe that there is not a clear dividing line. So, so it's not really that I think it should go in one direction or the other. So probably private sector will be able to tap the data, utilize the data better than public sector. But other than that, I don't really see an issue in that. And perhaps one further remark to what has been said here. Ondřej described here how the data were debated at the level of the individual committees. And it was like a copy-paste of the COVID pass debate. So we're speaking about like an interoperable system. COVID pass was just like single purpose, and this is broader. But the positions of the individual stakeholders, they were quite similar. Thank you very much. Should the access of public and private sector to secondary data differ? I'm thinking about some cases here. Well, if the data was to be publicly accessible, that practically everybody would have access, so then it wouldn't really matter whether a legal entity would obtain access or a public authority or something. But then if it's, for instance, extremely sensitive data, would those be on demand? But I can't think of anything specific here. I'm not dogmatic, but I believe that this can be dealt with on an ad hoc basis. Thank you very much. Ondřej Knotek? I don't really see a reason for that. One thing that I've mentioned, and that is that, well, this opt-out from the system may be overridden if there is this major public interest. But then the data can only be processed by a public institution. I think I don't have the definition like in my head. I don't really remember the complete definition, but it's something like that. But then, indeed, part of the public may be against it if there was this difference. So I wouldn't really differentiate between the public and private sectors in terms of access to data. Okay, thank you very much. And now we are moving to a final question. Well, I'd like to ask you to please sum up your priorities, what you believe can be done at EU level to make the EU more attractive in terms of investments and to face shortage of drugs, unavailability, and so that healthcare would be available at state-of-the-art level to all citizens. So please be very brief and don't stray away to the green policy, etc. So please stick to healthcare and 2 minutes maximum. So do we have a volunteer to start with? So Ondřej Knotek would perhaps like to start, but after your respective 2 minutes each, so 6 in total. You have a chance to ask questions through Slido, but now Ondřej Knotek should start. So in brief, well, we should reduce the price of energies and not be overregulated, but I shouldn't speak about the price of energies. But anyway, we should strive to cover, say, 80% of diseases by various strategies. So continue along the lines of the Beating Cancer Plan, early intervention, early identification, have a robust cardiovascular disease plan, rare diseases, we've already touched upon that, and actually mental health. Well, I don't want to make this huge wish list, but I believe that all of these are equal priorities. And I personally think, and it gives me a great joy that I'm also in a group that addresses chronic kidney disease. So often this is an agenda that doesn't receive sufficient attention. Well, diabetes does, but not kidney disease, renal disease. So part of the research and development should also be dedicated to that as opposed to other politics. Okay, thank you very much for summing that up. And now Ondřej Krutílek. I believe that I've already said a lot, so let me just briefly summarize. So the legislation that we've discussed should be finalized, and let's just see how it works in practice. And the delegated act should not go against the intentions of this baseline act, which may sometimes happen too. So that's just the technicalities, and it's absolutely necessary that we create conditions to have pharmaceutical business here in Europe. I've mentioned it again several times that if we push the companies to the corner by putting rules in place and rules, that's indeed the crucial factor, they're going to escape. It doesn't even have to be the Inflation Reduction Act in the US or cheap labor in China, but still they would be fleeing. So we need to actually have these basic parameters in place to be successful in Europe and to be able to safeguard affordable medicines to citizens, so available as well as affordable at an affordable price. Thank you very much. And Albert Štěrba, please. So for me personally, the key priority is prevention, anything related to prevention. So we need to achieve better health of citizens, whether it's based on better data sharing, prevention, more effective, more efficient treatment, healthier lifestyles, availability of quality foodstuffs at affordable prices so that people can take good care of their health, education, activities, awareness raising, and so on and so forth. But how to boost innovations in Europe? One thing that hasn't been mentioned here as yet, if we would compare us with the US, so for instance certification and all that, it takes much longer over here than it does in the US. So the final stamp certification, FDA as opposed to EMA, it takes plus 4 or 5 months longer here, and we are speaking about medicines and speaking about e-health and telemedicine, medical devices and all that. So that also needs certain certification. And again, comparing our arena with the US, everything takes longer here. So this is one specific area where we have a lot of catching up to do. What are the reasons behind that? That some things take longer when it comes to the certification. There are not many reasons behind that. It's just like red tape reasons, administrative reasons. So when we look at, for instance, some studies that are available only in 7 medicines certified in the US and Europe, there were some minor deficiencies. So for instance, what the FDA passed wouldn't have even passed in Europe. So bureaucracy is to blame. So we should try to remove that to speed up in Europe. We have a lot of questions on Slido, but does anybody want to ask a question here in the hall? Yes, the mic goes to you, so feel free to ask. Thank you very much, Misha. I'm Eva Karaskova, MSD. May I have a short comment before I ask a question? Go for it. Surely it will be related. I have a big disadvantage because I've been in this European domain for nearly 30 years, and really thanks to the gentleman for this excellent debate. We have really moved away from the primary purpose of why we regulate public health, and this is the internal market, removing barriers for mutual trade. We are regulating medicines, medical devices, so that we would have efficient, safe and high-quality medicines entering the market. Over our 20-year membership in the EU, we have basically collected a huge list of wishes, what we want the EU to do. And I'm not challenging anything here, but in the context of where our competences are, where the member states have their responsibilities. And I think that it's quite populistic that member states are actually giving up their responsibility, looking up to Brussels to help them solve certain issues. So that's just, to pave the ground. But let me now go back to my question. Let's go back to the pharma package. Ondřej Knotek has already mentioned it, but we're speaking just about one topic out of a huge number of other topics. The European Parliament, in its new composition, will definitely go back to that. And we have also representatives of patient organizations here. And when in 2008 I saw the first pharma package, information for patients, that was one of the first pillars. And after 20 years, we're here in a digital era. We all know what was happening in COVID, impossibility to communicate certain information to patients. So I'd like to open one topic here. It would be a shame not to have it in the new legislation. So there is, big importance attached to that. And then my second question is, how can we improve the environment so that we can have a joint debate with governments, with the industry, and with other stakeholders, and seek the holy grail that we want the EC to supply to us, because everybody's expectations are different. So we're in this world where the expectations are completely different from reality. And, well, gentlemen, you already heard it from me at the business breakfast, so we are here and ready to talk. Okay, so patience and dialogue, that's the two questions. Ondřej Knotek. And your first question was like information for patients, so you mean like the leaflets and that? As for the position of the Parliament, so it's possible to have this digital leaflet on demand. The patient may request the paper form. So was that your question, if I've understood it correctly? I apologize, I didn't perhaps understand. I was wondering what you meant, whether it was this digital information, but perhaps you need to specify your first question. I appreciate that the EC and that the EP are moving to electronic provision of information, but what I was referring to was regulation of advertising, medicines advertising, which is 30 years old. So on the internet, patients can basically find everything. I don't want billboards to be available at every corner, but perhaps to a more advance into digital arena. Perhaps David would like to add to that. So, it's a long-term priority, not just for us. I don't really see a reason for regulation here. We should leave it up to the market. And as for cooperation, I believe that the left wingers in the European Parliament, well, that was terrible. And there are the more business-oriented people, and then the more like trade union sort of people. And the left wingers, the Green members, often have a completely different position. I don't have really a silver bullet how to solve all that, but hopefully the new parliament will be less ideological and there'll be more room for dialogue. The pharmaceutical industry is not the most toxic topic. Well, there is coal and tobacco, their position is worse. So I believe it will be better, but there is this risk, and some harm was already done by sort of slightly spitting on patient organizations with which we cooperate. So everybody wants the medicines, but somebody needs to be paid, and somebody wants them to have as cheap as possible and as fast as possible. Okay, thank you. And the need for dialogue, gentlemen, there is a question on Slido regarding that. Dialogue is important from the perspective of the pharma industry. The dialogue with the Ministry of Health, which takes care of pharma legislation, is non-existent. Do you have an idea how to establish relations with stakeholders and how to lead dialogue? So that's one question, dialogue at Czech and European level. And then the second question is regulation of advertising in this area necessary. As for advertising, well, I don't have a clear opinion yet, because I know that naturally it would be advantageous for the pharma industry to have advertising that's like more readily available, because then the medicines can get to the patients. But then there is the information that doctors and healthcare professionals are aware of, but then how does that information influence the end user? But then, yes, the information can clearly be found online, perhaps not in a form that's not compliant with EU standards, and then it may be rather to the detriment, because advertising is practically like not allowed. So I'm just thinking about whether advertising would be, for instance, one specific medicine or some generic, where the manufacturer would only be secondary, but it would be just providing information to the patient about, for instance, the active substance or something like that. So I would need to know more about advertising to be able to form my opinion on that. And as for the dialogue, communication is absolutely crucial, just like in any area. And as politics, European politics is highly interconnected with Czech politics, and it's crucial to know that Brussels and Prague are not like two places, but it's rather like one place. We indeed should have more contacts between Brussels politicians and politicians here, and ask more questions and then implement that in practice. So there shouldn't be a dual system while these two components don't communicate. Thank you very much. And Ondřej Krutílek.
Ondřej Krutílek, I think a lot of things have been already suggested about advertisement regulation. Well, I will not answer this question as follows. If the European Commission comes up with a proposal, then both member states or parliament will try to deal with that. But in fact, now to build a discussion on something unknown, not knowing what would be potentially generated, well, I don't want to go ahead with this direction. It doesn't make sense to me. But speaking about principle, as the advertisement is regulated in other areas, also in the green policy, you can make an advertisement, but you should avoid greenwash. Of course, certain rules must be established, but not having any specific ideas, it will be too academic discussion. Well, speaking about the dialogue, then I think that at least two of us are working in the European Parliament already, even though we work at different positions. We are conducting the dialogue already, and I'm personally really pleased to establish any contact with Czech Republic colleagues. Thinking about the history 10 to 15 years ago, the position of Czechs was about refusal. It was a Schweig approach. We were just saying it is not a effort of us immediately, and you are threatening us, and then it was flipped over. Oh, it's too late. We cannot do anything about it. This approach is fortunately changing, and irrespective of the parties, all European Parliament members are open to discussions because they represent Czech Republic there. We can just explain whatever European Parliament is representing European citizens and so on and so on. But the practice is different. Make use of the communication channel, please. It is open, and if things don't work at the national level, then it's your responsibility to streamline that. Everybody has to be aware of own responsibilities and possibilities, but we are all open to your suggestions. Oh, I see an open question, David Kolář. Well, I didn't want to comment the advertisement, but I have to. Well, the basic trouble is that the biggest danger is that the advertisement is regulated in a non-reasonable manner. In fact, the discussion should not be about advertisement and promotion, but why patients' organizations should not share information with possibility of treatment in the given diseases and so on. So it results to the fact that it is causing this situation. So we are pretending it is not possible, but everybody who is speaking English using Google then can find it on internet or search on Mama Forum, a website, for instance. Well, I just wanted to confirm from our own experience that all three gentlemen are open to communication. I have to say it was not true for all parties, but in your parties it works really well, and I think it's a good step ahead, which is a guarantee that it will work like that also in the European Parliament. I just wanted to get back to the production, like the example of the European Airbus comparing to Czech vaccine. We don't have it yet, despite the fact that we have invested a couple of millions already. Europe seems to be schizophrenic because on one hand we are proclaiming that we should be partially self-sufficient also by returning part of the production from Asia back to Europe. Well, really strong claims, but in addition to the list, Europe did not do much, and it doesn't seem that it's willing to do a lot. Plus, there are some regulations, some reimbursement for cleaning water, which should, however, not be paid from the pharma side, but impacts the pharma companies. So I think it's really schizophrenic, and Europe has to decide. When I keep saying Europe, then I mean Commission and Member States. Do we want to be autonomous? However, it will be associated with cost, because if I pushed part of the industry outside and wanting to attract them back, everything is regulated here much more than the other continents. The environmental policy, it's really important topic, and nevertheless it is discussed only within Europe, nowhere else, which means that the production will always be more expensive in Europe compared to the other continents, and we simply have to motivate producers to get back somehow. I really do not see any specific acts attracting producers to Europe. Thank you very much for your feedback. That's exactly what we want to hear, because European Commission is triggering a discussion, maybe not a legislation or strategy, accompanied by a nice communication, and then want to hear cross-section opinion. Well, you refer to schizophrenia. Well, it's a good notion. Well, I call it the lack of management. After our announcement, Mrs. Merman and the aircraft, I get off the plane in Brussels, and I was shocked. Does anybody actually manage it? And as you suggested at the beginning, as we speak about industry, yes, it's healthcare, but also pharma industry. And the individual EG directorates are far away, even though they are required to cooperate. There is some required discussion, but still Ursula von Leyen is managing everything, and the absence of management and absence of a sane thinking, well, I have to admit it, and of course a lack of ideology and political spectrum is assuming certain differences in the political ideologies, but right hand didn't know what the left hand is doing, actually. And I have experienced 7 cases when outputs of European Commission were in contradiction, including the healthcare ones. So slide a question. So member states are giving orders to Commission. How is it possible then Commission is simply off the target sometimes? Well, the member states do not give orders to Commission. No, I think it is determined by European Parliament. Well, we keep saying that European Parliament should be launching all legislative proposals, drafts, but everybody thinking about 2 levels below find out that the Parliament is already authorized to do it. Member states, unfortunately, are at the end of the shorter or disadvantaged but that's their fault, actually, because during the year they just let the European Commission to do everything, to delegating it, and the result is demonstrated. And in my view, the trouble is somewhere else. We have to, and I'm talking about Czech Republic only, we have to have more positions in the European Commission in order to be able to get more information about what is happening within a European Commission. Thus, we will be allowed to influence the rules that are generated by European Commission and European Parliament, but the reality is totally different. Well, maybe I will add the other view also from Slido, speaking about accessibility, availability not only of innovative medicines, well, the states are pushed to improve the innovation. Usually pharma industry is only pushed to do something in the innovative products. Well, the role of the states. Well, it's about setting the procedures when approving the products, accessibility, availability of the medicines. And it's about solidarity and data sharing. Let's say we will prepare information system knowing where certain medicines are located, and when there is a threat of a shortage, then individual member states will require a redistribution. That's the key role, in my view. The question is, would it actually work? Would member states would be really in the solidarity mode? Well, I think the European Commission does not push enough the member states because the industry part is simply not somehow considered by the DG Sante sufficiently, and DG Sante simply likes thinking potential, speaking about industry. And I would say there are kind of impotent. So those who are in the business mode don't push them, and the healthcare segment likes this thinking. They have the healthcare mode of thinking. Eva Karásková. Speaking about the diagnosis, you mean schizophrenia and impotence? So the first one. Well, it does not exclude the other one, because in our view, there is a strategy to support biotechnology triggered by DG Sante supporting the bioindustry in Europe. Nevertheless, it is against DG Sanko. And in 2008, the first pharmaceutical package was driven by Sante, and the healthcare professionals criticized the legislation because it's from 90% about the industry, IPR protection and so on, and it was big trouble. Sanko had generated it now, but actually those two segments do not communicate sufficiently to find a balance. Well, unfortunately, it's even worse than among individual ministries in the Czech Republic. It's really even worse. So that's at least what I know from the power industry, energy, single market, and so on. Well, it's quite clear, and I agree with your first assessment. And what a European Parliament can do about it. Or who can do something about it? Member states that would simply get the position in the EU institutions by competitive personnel promoting the national interests, and we would know everything sufficiently in advance. And speaking about the extended hand, I think we miss it also here in the Czech Republic at the level of government and coordination mechanism, because all those proposals have to be approved by the relevant committees within EU. And once we fail in the negotiation in 2 years, not being able to identify the impact, fighting for our position within our government, of course, then at the end of the day, the opposition and interest of the Czech Republic is failing. So we don't know what is happening within individual departments of our Commission. So we are not able to communicate interdepartmentally. So, for instance, the Ministry of Industry and Trade is afraid to comment it because the Ministry of Health is saying, oh, it's within our responsibility. Well, we can discuss it later on because the level of details probably will be too boring for most of you. But in fact, the different positions, the Council of Ministries and so on. As far as I know, we have stakeholders, at least in the stage of preparation. Well, I'm not talking about the healthcare, but I witness it in different segments. So if something does not work here, so then we can think about the way how to improve it. Well, I was there thinking about amendments of the template for the position. It was quite disastrous. Let's hope it will be more user-friendly now. But of course, it's never-ending story. So this is quite valuable comment, and definitely I would like to elaborate on it later on. Not in favor of your business. I don't mean it like that. But I think we simply have to improve the situation. If you wish to respond now, then please do it now, because then I have 2 rounds of questions for you. Since we have a recent experience with it now, well, we have expected that the ministries will launch the initial position and will ask for comments, all stakeholders, healthcare insurance companies, and pharma industries, and so on. But at the end of the day, our comments were not included at all. So what the industry commented was simply missing, and I had a chance to be present at 2 meetings of the committee, one in the Senate and one in the Parliament, and it was quite sad. Well, I had a feeling that the member of parliaments are bothered by talking about it. Well, the discussion in the Senate was much better, but I feel that in real life the process does not work at all. Well, we are mixing apples with pears. There is working committee at the level of government, plus you have 2 committees from both chambers of the parliament. So speaking about EU documents, there is so much of it. They do not manage to filter it sufficiently, and they are really overloaded. They have to work also on domestic matters, which is their core business, and you cannot expect substantial detailed discussion from them. But speaking about government research and institutions, then the committee for EU, you can expect it from them. We have a question for all of you. In the European Parliament, we have 20 committees and 4 subcommittees. Where you would like to be member of? Which committee you would like to be member of? Ondřej definitely is knowledgeable also from his common practice. Well, I'm happily married with a committee, so I will not change my wife. You are either substitute member or a member, and you can vote only sometimes or not as a substitute member only when the regular member is missing. So I would like to be promoted from the substitute member in the ENVI committee, and we speak a lot about climate and energy policy, and ENVI is responsible for it also, speaking about healthcare. Speaking about the Committee for Regional Development, I would simply maybe like to continue. I would work in the Committee for Industry, which would allow me to cover Green Deal and everything related interlinking industry and Green Deal and so on. Thank you very much. What is your desired position, Ondřej Krutílek? I will use the and will Incotron. So, and the Committee for Environment, Committee for the Industry, Intran for Transport, and INCO for Internal Market. I'm a practical guy, not working for the theoretical parts, so I like the overlapping of all those segments. So everything else, well, of course, you manage the high level of politics, which is not in my heart, and to a certain extent, they speak about ideology, not working much, and I like to work a lot. So that's as you suggest to Albert Štěrba, that you can only name all those 4 committees you have suggested because the other committees don't work at all. Well, being limited by those 4 committees, I would select 3 of them. ENVI and Public Health Subcommittee, of course, maybe that's my ambition to promote it to a committee from the position of subcommittee, and then switch to sustainable economy, of course, in a socially responsible, sensitive way. And then transportation is close to my heart also. So if I have some time, I would focus on better transportation modes in Europe. So I like trains, for instance, so maybe this, but it's only an additional wish. And the very last question that gets back to our topic, would you agree, if elected to EP, would you agree with the lowest position of the GPL, or would you request reopening of this issue? So, Ondřej Knotek, yes, I would agree. I would agree, but I would like to add it will be reopened again once the Council will forward its position. So, well, there are a lot of issues that I don't like, but to reopen it, no, I will not open the position again. I will agree with my colleagues because time will show, and maybe in the due time we will see whether it works well or not. So maybe we are not aware of certain aspects, and we are maybe even not able to find it out right now. I think quite clear positions. Ondřej Knotek, Ondřej Krutílek, and Albert Štěrba, the candidates to EP in the upcoming elections. I made comments how to complete our meeting. Because I redacted the EU as we try to criticize it a lot. It's a schizophrenic impotent that is using wheat a lot and not using sugar that much, stitch and sugar. And let's hope that the upcoming period will show that we are able to change something and communicate with all stakeholders. Thank you very much for discussing. Thank you very much for your communication. That was the pre-election discussion of candidates for the European Parliament. I would like to thank the Association of Innovative Pharmaceutical Industry and Chamber of Commerce. I would like to thank Ondřej Knotek, Ondřej Krutílek, and Albert Štěrba. Thank you very much.